Hi, this is Charlie Rosen, the band leader of the 8-Bit Big Band, and you're listening to Pixelated Audio.
Welcome to Pixelated Audio, a podcast focusing on game audio, its history, and the people behind it. We are your hosts. I'm Brian, and this is Gene, and we have a great guest today to talk all about big band video game music.
Hey, everybody. Brian did a good introduction, and I'm just going to very quickly give a recap of how the show even happened before we introduced Charlie. But when we were doing our Pilot Wings show, I reached out to Charlie to let him know we were going to use an excerpt from Birdman on the show, and he's like, yeah, sounds great. Hey, do you guys want to have me on the show one day? And I'm like, hell yes. So here he is. Welcome to the show, Charlie.
Hey, how's it going? Good to be here.
It's great to have you. We're just talking about Birdman. I was like, man, should we play Birdman? I think we've expended all of our Birdman tokens for the next 6 months.
Like 10 years.
Yeah, so we're good. We got a really great show today, and this is something that we haven't had the opportunity to really dive into on this podcast is big band music. And we have just these fantastic arrangements that the 8-Bit Big Band is put together, and it's a lot of fun, a lot of nostalgia. And this track we came in with, Bob-Omb Battlefield from Mario 64, should kind of put the show in the right motion, because it hits all of those kind of earmarks that you want to hear. It puts a smile on my face, because this is one of those soundtracks that was pivotal for me because of the game and the time that it came out too. It was such like this happy and peppy and energizing, fun track, and kind of hearing it in this arrangement, this big band form, just brings out all the big guns, and it just sounds so incredible.
This is exactly how I've always imagined it sounding.
Same.
I've heard a lot of arrangements of this track, sure, and they're all really good, but this one's so crisp and bright, and it's a great start. This is the first track off of the first of 3 albums. This one is called, remind me again, it was Press Start?
Press Start, which, when I made that album, I was fully unaware of that there even was a scene for video game music as well. It's just something that I had always wanted to do. And doing that album, putting it out there, then sort of discovering after the fact, oh, wow, there's so many other people out there like me who have an appreciation for this art form. I now realize that Press Start is a somewhat cliche name for a video game album, as there's many other things called Press Start. But at the time, I thought I was really inventive.
Well, let's back up a second here. So 8-Bit Big Band is a band with about 30 to 60 members that formed around, 2018?
Yeah.
Okay. And you guys have done like live concerts and stuff like that, all sorts of stuff. I guess maybe during COVID probably hit a little bit of a snag, but managed to put out a lot of albums, and there's a lot of really good music to dig through in your Bandcamp. Tell us a little bit about your role in this and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm sort of like the head of the entire operation. It's something I'd always wanted to do as a kid, and I have a more specific story about really the thing that inspired me to finally get up and do it after sitting dormant on this idea for a long time. But I sort of do all logistical and musical creative things that need to happen in order for this to be. So I'm the band leader. I'm in front of the band. I'm conducting the band, obviously live. I do all of the arrangements. I write out all the sheet music. I'm coordinating all of the recording sessions. I do all of the social media at this point. We just this year started working with some producers that are now stepping on board and helping me slightly with the social media and producing the live shows. But up until now, I did all of that myself, all of the planning.
Wow.
And
that's
I
like 3 full-time jobs.
I know.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of musicians. Like every show, we have 33 musicians, and it's never the same every time. That's just impossible. So, but luckily, I'm surrounded by so many talented people in New York that every time we do a recording session, which is also generally 33 to 45, we've been as big as 65 people in the orchestra. Yeah, I'm sort of planning it all. And then, the things I don't do are, I don't do my graphic design. I have an incredible graphic designer who has done every piece of graphic design for the 8-Bit Big Band, has been crushing it. He's awesome. We wouldn't be here without him. I have a mixing engine and a recording engineer. He's incredible. We wouldn't be here without him. A mastering engineer. But outside of that, I'm in charge of all the arrangements, producing the tracks. I play a lot of instruments on the tracks, lots of extra guitars and percussion, and arranging it, sequencing the demos, and anything involved in the logistics of making an album or live show is pretty much me. That being said, I should say, that all is true, except none of it would be possible without the hundreds of musicians who contribute their time and talent to making the thing happen. I'm just a vehicle for them to showcase what I've been working towards. So I should say that.
Well, an important vehicle.
Yeah.
Yes.
It wouldn't be an 8-Bit Big Band if it was just you.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably not.
Exactly.
But, I was going to say, let's step back even a little bit further.
Yeah.
How did you get here? Not necessarily the genesis of the band, but tell us about yourself. Your history as a musician and, your development as an artist. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been playing music for a long time. I started taking piano lessons when I was 3. Both of my parents are musicians. My mom is a bassoon player and a classical musician. My dad is an organist and a pianist, and all things jazz and sort of any music before 1945, basically. And so between those two things, I grew up with that kind of music. But, when I was in high school, I wanted to play in bands, and I was playing guitar and bass and drums, and in Los Angeles and playing in ska bands and rock bands and punk bands and whatever, ended up going to a music high school, a music college, and I sort of fell into the theater world by doing some musicals in Los Angeles while I was in high school that happened to move to New York. So I moved to New York and found myself in the theater world where I'm sort of really well suited because I ended up playing in a lot of pits and playing in a lot of shows, and then eventually getting in with a lot of young theater composers and saying, hey, I'll do your arrangements. I'll help you produce whatever you need to be, write your music down, whatever you want to do. I'll help you do it. And worked my way up to being a full-time theater orchestrator, which is essentially what I do with the 8-Bit Big Band. I mean, the skill set is largely the same. Somebody writes a piece of music and you take it and you expand it for the orchestra and you help them realize the sound of it in the way that you think is right for the project. Only difference being I don't really answer to anybody in the 8-Bit Big Band. I just do whatever I want to do instead of, instead of working with composers to get their score sounding the way that they want it to based on the show or the genre or the instrumentation or the budget or whatever. So I'm thoroughly entrenched in the world of Broadway, and I've moved on to doing some TV writing and some film scoring stuff. But
anything we would know?
I just did this huge film that I produced all the songs for, and I'm like 80% sure I can say the name of it, but I don't want to get in trouble.
Well, let's not get you in trouble.
I did see you did some work on Marvelous Miss Maisel, which was a great show, but I'm curious what you did on there because there was so much great music on it.
Yeah, and I had a pretty minor role on that show, to be honest. I was just helping out with like producing some of the demos of big band stuff that was heard in it, and I played guitar on the recording sessions a few times, so I didn't have like a huge part in that, but it was really cool to be around the people who were making that music, and that stuff was incredible. But I've been a band leader and a composer for like late night show on NBC called Maya and Marty that was very short lived. I'm helping do some music for anytime they need songs, or I'm doing a string quartet for Gossip Girl. On HBO's on High Maintenance, there's an episode where there's a theremin player, and I play theremin, so I recorded the theremin and made the track for them and like helped coach them. And what other TV? There was a show in 2016 called The President's Show that was on Comedy Central that was like this comedian impersonating Trump. I wrote all the music for that. That was fairly short-lived. So that was cool. And then I'm surrounded by, I've done, I think 11 Broadway shows at this point. So that really is like the focal point of my career. I scored a Billy Crystal film a year during the pandemic, actually, which was wild. Just whatever I got to do. And all of that money goes directly into the 8-Bit Big Band, basically.
You've done a few projects, it sounds like.
Yeah, done some stuff.
Oh, before we move on, I want to make sure that we do have a chance to bring up the track that we came in with from Mario 64, Bob-Omb Battlefield. I kind of mentioned some of my past feelings about it, but tell us a little bit about this track.
Yeah, so Bob-Omb Battlefield, the thing about this track is that it is essentially like the video game music national anthem. Like, I think this song and a handful of other video game music songs have transcended their function within the games. And for people who are in the video game music scene or appreciators of the music, know them as what is essentially video game standards. If there's any jazz musicians out there, you know that jazz has jazz standards. It's this collection of tunes that everybody needs to know. If you want to play jazz, it's Autumn Leaves, All the Things You Are. These things where like people don't sometimes know that they're from these old Broadway shows. Like they had an origin point in popular media, but have transcended that to become functionally their own canon of music. And so similarly with jazz standards, the Great American Songbook, film scores, Broadway, scores, cast albums, we have this new canon of songs that a generation grew up listening to and appreciated that have transcended their original function and have become a canon of work in their own that we can all collectively play and enjoy. And so Bob-Omb Battlefield is definitely one of, if not maybe I'd say the only one more well-known is the actual Mario Bros theme from Mario, Mario Bros.
Right.
Yeah.
1. But Bob-Omb Battlefield, and like Green Hill Zone, for example, have become these like video game music standards where you can go to MagFest and there's a jam session and you can say, let's play Bob-Omb Battlefield, and they play it. And the amazing thing I've also experienced is that we make one arrangement available on our website for download, and it's Bob-Omb Battlefield. And high schools and colleges have downloaded it, and they'll play it, and I'll sometimes do these virtual clinics where I listen to the band and give them thoughts and notes. And the cool thing I always ask is, do you know what game this is from? And they go, yeah, it's Bob-Omb Battlefield. We know Bob-Omb Battlefield. I'm like, okay, great. Raise your hand if you were born when Bob-Omb Battlefield and Mario 64 came out. Nobody raises their hand because they're in high school or because they weren't alive.
Oh my God.
I know. And yet they still know this track because it's transcended just being connected to the experience of playing that game and has become a video game music cultural touchstone. So that's why I wanted to start my album with that. It felt like I have to put my Bob-Omb Battlefield token into the ring to be a video game music band.
And you set the tone perfectly. I mean, you really introduced the fact that you guys do a lot of solos. It's a big band, but you also have a lot of the jazz. The idea of playing the head and then doing some of the soloing, and we're going to be talking about that a lot over the course of the show, I'm sure.
Right. But we do have a lot of music though, so I want to jump into our next track before we dig too deep, because otherwise we're going to have like talking for the first half hour and then we're going to play a bunch of tracks. So let's jump into our next track here. This is actually from another Mario game. This is Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, and the track is called Athletic Theme.
All right, that was the athletic theme from Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, also from Album 1 Press Start from the 8-Bit Big Band.
This is a great track. It's very whimsical. I mean, much like the game. So I think there was a lot of the spirit captured there. It definitely takes this turn from like this big band in this last track that we had, Bob-Omb Battlefield, over to a more like kind of Dixieland style, almost like theme. Mm-hmm. But it just with like, it's almost like the kazoos or the slide whistles or whatever. It just sounds
the whoopee siren. I can get that for you if you want. It's like my favorite.
Please, we'll just have to add that in. Yeah. Every time I think of somebody slipping on a banana peel, that.
Oh, it's got all the comic sound effects, the ones that you expect. Practically the wah wah, the slide whistle, all that sort of stuff.
This is sort of like whenever I'm working on like a traditional Broadway show or like a musical comedy or like anything like that. This is like the spice that I put on top of everything that I sometimes overuse it.
Charlie Chaplin. Yeah, and you know, it's funny because it has like so much like zing in this track that it's just fun to listen to. It's a lot of like comical elements, and it does mirror the game. Like I was saying, it's got like you know, it's very pastel and colorful game, and the track itself matches that. And this arrangement kind of goes that one step further and makes it almost like this like saloony kind of Dixieland vibe. I like it a lot.
So tell us a little bit about how the 8-Bit Big Band formed. I know we didn't get a chance to talk about that yet.
Yeah, the 8-Bit Big Band forming has a really cool story that I really like to tell. Basically, me and my girlfriend, we took a vacation to Japan, sort of this impromptu trip. We saw these cheap tickets, thought, okay, let's go. When I travel to foreign countries, I like to buy an instrument that's from that country's traditional music or something, or like go hear some stuff or whatever. And so I was in an Airbnb in Kyoto, and I was on the same street as this music store that had been open for like 300 years or something. And I bought a shamisen, which is like a traditional Japanese string instrument, like plucked string instrument. Wanted to take a lesson on it. One of my band members, Zach Zinger, he is like a shakuhachi player, which is a Japanese woodwind. And he had been there to study and made a lot of friends in the sort of traditional Japanese music scene. So he hooked me up with a friend of his that lived in Tokyo to give me a lesson on the shamisen. And I went over to his apartment. Great lesson, really cool guy. We had such a good time. And I saw on his floor on the way out, he had a soundtrack for Ganbare Goemon, which only one or two titles have been released in the West of that. But on N64 was Mystical Ninja starring Goemon, which is one of my favorite games.
Same here.
And I said, oh my God, I love that game. And I said, oh, I love that game. I love that soundtrack. And he said, oh, do you like video game music? And I thought, yeah, I do. I mean, I've never really put it into words, but like I really do actually a lot. And I listen to video game music a lot, and it means a lot to me. And he said, oh, that's so amazing. Let me give you something. And he gave me a copy of his album, and you should check this out. He has a band called Famikoto, and like Famicom, but Famikoto. And it's all, the koto being another Japanese instrument. Mm-hmm. And it's all video game music arranged for traditional Japanese ensemble. And I was listening to it on the plane, and I was like, oh man, this is so cool. And
that sounds amazing.
I've always wanted to and I've had big bands in New York. I have another big band called the Broadway Big Band that does all theater music that I reinterpret. And I said, I've always wanted to do this. I should make a video game big band music album. And that fall I got home, that was 2018. And I, arranged 10 or 11 songs, and that was the first album, and I put it out, and the rest is history. It just sort of was one of those things that I was inspired by a really cool experience with a fellow musician, and now here we are.
Wow. That's super awesome.
That's really cool. Do you happen to remember the music store that you went to in Kyoto?
Okay.
Only reason why is because I think I know which one you might be talking about if it's in Kawaramachi.
Ooh, let me look. Because I just looked it up for someone recently, but it's like highly ungoogleable, it's
as is almost everything over there.
Yes. So I'm literally, I started on Google Maps, so I'm now zooming into Kyoto on Google Maps because I wanted to find it. Well, let me Google translate this kanji because I do not know enough kanji to be able to, except for I recognize the kanji for instrument, musical, and goods. I don't know how to say this.
Well, we can put a link to the address or something in the show notes.
We'll put a link to that album that you mentioned, but tell us about this track. How did you even pick this style to go with? Was it more of a natural fit?
Yeah.
Tell us the whole story there. Yeah.
Yeah, you're touching on something really interesting, and that is essentially with the 8-Bit Big Band, there are two directions that I go in with the two songs. And those two directions are either I hear the original, right? And I play the original game and I say, okay, great. I totally hear what you're going for. The original was already kind of like trad jazz. I mean, in the bones of the thing, it has the harmony and the melody and the rhythmic style of that, New Orleans traditional jazz kind of thing. And so I say, okay, great. You were working with limited hardware at the time. What you did is incredible. Now I'm going to take that and fully run with it all the way in the direction that you would have gone if this had been a performance piece. Give it the full New Orleans treatment, the full 30s, 20s, 30s big band, jazz band, Dixieland band thing. And then think okay, what other tricks that are in the same idiom or language can I throw in there? Okay, let's get a clarinet solo. Let's do a stride piano section, which was, of course, inspired by Tom Breyer, the amazing pianist who has plenty of videos playing. He's an incredible stride pianist, and he plays this theme. He has a video of this. So I always kept that in mind. So that felt right. So the first direction I take is take the idea the composer was going for, run with it full steam ahead. The other direction I take is things like we do Still Alive from Portal, except I take it in a totally left field direction, and I can always put my orchestrational ideas into an English sentence. I think the best orchestrations and arrangement ideas come from a seed of a dramaturgical idea that's in English. So like my seed phrase for Still Alive was, what if Frank Sinatra played Portal? You know?
Right.
So I take it that way. I go, okay, I'm going to do something totally, totally different. So the whole of the 8-bit big band things, you can really divide them into one of two ways in that way. And in this one, it's the former. It's, oh, wow, they were really going for this trad jazz thing. I'm going to take that and really, really run with it. I mean, and Koji Kondo is such a great melodist and harmonist, and was working with the limited technology he was working with, and still was able to make these incredible forms and themes that fit into these genres so well. And this is a perfect example of that.
Awesome. Speaking of Still Alive from Portal, we're actually going to play that one next. So
Cool.
That is a perfect segue in. So let's take a listen. This is Still Alive from Portal.
This was a triumph. I'm making a note here, huge success. It's hard to overstate my satisfaction. Aperture science. We do what we must because we can, for the good of all of us, except the ones who are dead. But there's no sense crying over every mistake. You just keep on trying till you run out of cake, and the science gets done, and you make a neat gun for the people who are still alive. I'm not even angry. I'm being so sincere right now. Even though you broke my heart and killed me, tore me to pieces, and threw every piece into a fire. As they burned, it hurt because I was so happy for you. Now these points of data make a beautiful line, and we're out of beta, we're releasing on time. So I'm glad I got burned to think of all the things we've learned for the people who are still alive. Me still talking when there's science to do. When I look out there, it makes me glad I'm not you. I've experiments to run, there is research to be done on the people who are still alive. And believe me, I am still alive. And while you're dying, I'll be still alive. I feel fantastic and I'm still alive. And when you're dead, I will be still alive. Still alive. Still alive. I'm still alive, baby.
All right, that was Still Alive from Portal, and that was sung by Benack III from 8-Bit Big Band.
And that's from the second album, Choose Your Character. We've now transitioned from the first to the second album. So tell us about this track. This one caught me completely off guard when I first heard it. I'm like, this is not what I was expecting out of this track.
Well, it's actually funny you bring up Miss Maisel. So this actually was inspired around the same time I was helping out with that show. And the story of this is I was asked to create a demo of a big band arrangement for the TV show. And the demo arrangement was, and it was a great arrangement by Bill Elliott, who is a great orchestrator as well. And I was making a demo. The director had asked him to make a version of What a Wonderful World in the style of I've Got the World on a String by Frank Sinatra. And he did a great job. I was making a demo of it. So I had I've Got the World on a String in my head. And was thinking like, what should I be doing with the second album? And I'd always wanted to do Still Alive. And I was actually in the shower when I started singing in the same key and sort of same groove. I was, this is a triumph. Making a note here. I'm like, oh, this is going to work. This is going to work really well, actually. And so it's really like being an arranger is sort of doing so much listening and exploring of all these different genres and styles and feels that you just have this soup of musical junk in your head, and it combines, and then it comes out in ways you make connections and you hear potential in things based on whatever junk you have floating around your head. And so that's what inspired that. And so if anybody goes and listens to I've Got the World on a String by Frank Sinatra with the arrangement by the great Nelson Riddle, who's one of my heroes, you'll hear that I was heavily inspired by a lot of those horn figures, and I lovingly borrowed very many of the gestures of Nelson Riddle, and both this and all of the other Portal covers are all inspired by Nelson Riddle songs with Frank Sinatra. And you can really most of the time point to the exact one that I'm sort of happily paying tribute to. In this case, it's I've Got the World on a String.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
This is a good opportunity to say I have a small confession to make that I didn't actually listen to a lot of Sinatra as a kid. My introduction to this style of lounge swing crooner music was from the character in Hey Arnold.
Yes.
there's like a character who's like an aging lounge singer.
No, it's Dino Spumoni.
Yes,
he's
exactly.
Like, that one song that's like, that fancy painting on the wall, darling, pow, I'll smack 'em all. It's
basically,
like, baby, you broke my heart in pieces on the floor. He's got some great songs, and I've been wanting to cover those.
I feel like I'm missing this. Like I totally missed that show. So I've heard of it, but
yeah, Dino Spumoni is kind of like this aging lounge singer. Is like his heyday of singing that music is behind him, but he's still a great singer. It's great music.
I'm talking about Hey Arnold.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Dino he's a character in that show.
Oh, he's a character in that.
Yeah, he's the fake lounge singer.
He's a fake Frank Sinatra, or like fake Dean Martin. But me and Benny have texted a number of times being like, man, we got to cover some Dino Spumoni songs. We actually really have. I love those songs.
That's so funny.
They're so good.
And what also is funny is that, I've been listening to this track or this whole album for a while now, and so I almost can't remember, like, if I want to sing the song, I don't think I could not do this version now.
sorry Jonathan Coulton.
I don't know how to rethink about the other one, so this is kind of taking the place. Cool.
And we have a third one coming out. I'm starting to work on our fourth album, and we have an arrangement of You Wouldn't Know, which is from Portal Lego Dimensions, or Lego Portal Dimensions. Which one is it? I'm gonna check. Lego Dimensions Portal.
Lego Dimensions Portal.
It's from Lego Dimensions Portal, which I never played, but everybody kept being like, you have to do You Wouldn't Know from Lego Dimensions Portal. So now we're completing the trilogy, and we're doing that for album 4. So that's coming out.
Awesome. Let's get into our next track here. We have Luigi's Mansion theme, and this is one that I really wanted to put in here because, I wasn't a huge fan of the GameCube game when it first came out. I played the 3DS version and fell in love with it and had to go back and then really got into it. And I realized what a spectacular series it was. And so this theme definitely made me very happy to hear. So let's take a listen to Luigi's Mansion theme.
So that was the theme from Luigi's Mansion in the style of Sing 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 by Benny Goodman from our second album, Choose Your Character.
Called it, Brian. I was saying it's like Benny Goodman or Duke Ellington. It's got to be one of those.
Yeah, Benny Goodman. I mean, this is Sing Sing Sing. Yeah,
It's literally.
No, it was the Chips Ahoy theme, right?
It's the Chips. I was just telling someone yesterday, fellow arranger, I was just saying, like, was your first exposure to Sing 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 the Chips Ahoy commercial? Because it was definitely mine, right?
Oh, same.
Yeah.
I went back and took jazz appreciation classes, and I'm like, oh, that's where it comes from.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. This is a cool one. Similarly, like I was saying before, sometimes, you just have junk floating around your head and you just have an idea that clicks and you're like, oh, this will work really well. And specifically, listening to Luigi's Mansion, the thing that really made it click was, I don't know if there's any, musicians or people who know theory out there or whatever, but the first two, the chord progression of this theme from Luigi's Mansion is very similar to a jazz standard called Bernie's Tune, which is pretty much identical chords. And so I thought, oh, that's cool. They have very similar chords. We could do a swing thing with that. That would be easy. And then I realized, oh, this Luigi's Mansion tune is in A minor and sort of like has that era of swing to it with these chord changes. So, maybe I should do a sing thing with it, because that's also an A minor,
Which is so funny, because what reminded me of the Bernie's Tune is there was an album. I was a huge sax player.
Oh, great. Well, then yeah.
And so Jerry Mulligan, I was just telling Gene this last night. There was something that just reminded me of Jerry Mulligan's version of this.
Right.
And immediately brought it up. And so, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm not crazy. So.
Right. Yeah. You're not crazy. No, it's just taking these little jumps between like linked genres. You're like, oh, Bernie's Tune has these chords. Oh, it's in A minor, like Sing Sing Sing. Oh, I'll put it on clarinet. Oh, actually it works really well on clarinet. Oh, you know what? I'm just going to do Sing Sing Sing. It's sort of this like.
Oh, totally. And one thing I really have to sort of commend you on is, we were privileged enough a few years ago to have Chris Madigan talking about his soundtrack for Cuphead, which was really awesome. But you do a very similar thing. You pay a lot of respect to those genres. And in fact, one thing I notice a lot is, you mentioned, I think even before, your horn figures borrow, liberally from those songs. But I feel like it really isn't that style unless you're really like laying into it. So I'm really curious about, you mentioned the general style of arrangements, but I'm kind of curious how the actual like building up of the tracks works in sort of a general way.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because what being an arranger is not only hearing this like unrealized potential, but it's sort of like speaking a language and speaking a dialect of a language. Like you can speak jazz, but then like there are dialects within jazz. There's a big difference between 30s and 50s and 60s and 70s big band. And they all have slightly different accents. And those accents are the horn figure vocabulary, the phrasing, the articulation, what types of instruments you're using, electric stuff, acoustic stuff, the grooves that they use. So if you want to pay really authentic tribute in the style of these things, you have to know the specifics that make the DNA up specifically of those sort of subgenres of the larger genre that you're working in. And so in a lot of these arrangements, I decide, okay, the larger genre is 1930s, 1940s big band. The subgenres are Bernie's Tune, Sing Sing Sing, that, and like that style of writing and horn figure writing, which they would have done specific rhythms that became passé in the 50s and the 60s. And they wouldn't have done, so it's knowing how to really get into the DNA of the era, the genre, the location. That's what makes a really authentic and really valuable tool as an arranger, is like really analyzing the DNA of these things and being able to replicate it, like learning a language and a dialect of a language,
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So let's get into our next track here. There's two tracks that we were going to choose from, and actually, why don't we ask Charlie on this? We were thinking about playing, because both of them are very, very good, and we just, for the sake of time, we couldn't decide, and we couldn't even remove them. We couldn't like actually take them off the list, so we're going to have to rely on you for this. So we were going to go between Aquatic, Ambiance, famous Donkey Kong Country, great song, and Dire Dire Docks, which is also another Mario 64 song, but features you as a soloist on it.
That's a tough choice.
Don't even be humble. If you
Yeah,
want
no,
to,
you can absolutely highlight yourself if you want to.
I really like both of those arrangements. Here's my dilemma. I think that Aquatic Ambiance, from the craft of orchestration, is a little bit more interesting in the way that I move through various textures.
you know what? I'm just going to stop you there. Let's just play them both. Aquatic Ambience from Donkey Kong Country. Let's take a listen. We'll be right back.
I knew this was gonna happen.
I knew this was going to happen. It always does.
That was Aquatic Ambience from Donkey Kong Country off of the second album, Choose Your Character, by the 8-Bit Big Band. Did I miss anything? I think I got it.
That was it.
Tell us about this track. It's so lovely. It's delicious.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that one it's a track that I've always loved and is also very beloved by the game music community at large. And listening to it, it just has such a vibe to it. It's so ethereal and spacious and sort of cinematic and I wanted to really pay tribute to that and think like, what if this was a theme from just like a big broad sort of like credit sequence from a film or opening sequence that pans across a large field or this spacious floaty and building element to it was just so apparent. And so I was really inspired by sort of like modern, really contemporary big band stuff, because the harmony in this sort of like minor 9 kind of modal thing is very, very contemporary,
Mm-hmm.
Lots of parallel moving minor 9 chords and major 9 chords, very ethereal. And so I was really thinking, okay, I'm going to think like Kenny Wheeler, like how would Kenny Wheeler approach this great contemporary big band arranger, and drew vocabulary like a lot of clusters and sort of like Maria Schneider is another good example of like contemporary big band arrangers that are sort of more impressionistic in their harmonic approach. So lots of cluster chords and really dense harmony and smooth textures and really sitting in these like interesting chords. The floating soprano voice on top of everything to add an element of like of cinematic quality to it and spaciousness. And then to really drive home the film element of it, I really wanted to write like sort of a piano concerto feature for it. And I had just been in touch with my friend Sydney at Smart Game Piano. If you don't know about Smart Game Piano, it's a YouTube channel and a site that teaches you piano through video game music. They're great.
Yeah, she's great.
She's great. And so we were like, we should do something together. And so I arranged this for her. And so I was drawing on sort of similarly harmonically interesting piano classical vocabulary. And I've always really loved this Khachaturian piano toccata that I can't remember exactly which one it is, but there's a ton of quotes in this arrangement that I pulled from it. So if people are pianists, they're going to recognize it. And yeah, just, so really going for this contemporary big band, like groove with backbeat, modern sax solo, interesting harmony, and lush string section to really give it like a width. And that was sort of the inspiration for it. And also I really was right in the middle of the arrangement and thought, I just need some other motif here or something. So we've been sitting in these floaty chords for so long. So I wrote this B section, which is not in the original, which moves through some more advanced harmonies so that when we get back to the floatiness into the sax solo, it's like bringing it back to like the harmony that we love from the track. It was a really cool one to work on and a beautiful one to record. It was really fantastic.
Can you tell me who plays the bassoon on this track?
Oh, that's my mom.
Bingo. I was waiting for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I noticed the last name and I was like,
yeah,
okay.
So that's my mom playing bassoon on this one.
Because I remember in the beginning of the show you mentioned your mom.
Yeah, that's right.
Bassoon. Yeah,
good callback. I wanted to use her on bassoon similarly because a lot of more modern big bands, they employ these more classical sounds in them. They aren't just all saxophones. So another piece of vocabulary there.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is David Wise is an incredible saxophonist. And
I want to feature him on. I know I want to feature him on a chart. I think he lives in the UK. If he listens to this, he
might.
He might give you parts at least. But.
Yeah, and what would be really funny is having him play a track that he didn't compose and just watching him like do his own David Wise version of it. That'd be really cool.
That's cool.
Have him do Portal.
Yeah.
Anyways, no, this is a great track. I do want to keep things moving. Let's jump into our next one here. This is another one that I was really happy that made it in. There's a few really good sonic tracks that you've arranged. And we were on the fence last night. Gene and I were really
narrowing down.
We were trying to figure out which one we wanted. And I think Hydrocity Zone really captures the best of big band and what you've done with this track. So let's take a listen to Hydrocity Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 3, arranged by 8-Bit Big Band.
Yeah,
man,
so
god
good.
damn. Right in the pocket. I love this. That was Hydrocity Zone, featuring Grace Kelly as the alto saxophone soloist, arranged by the 8-bit big band. And this is on the third album, Backwards Compatible, which was released in just last year, January.
Just last year, yeah, January.
I got a lot of quick things to say before we jump into the track. First, I know we mentioned playing Dire Docs. We will get back to that, folks, the astute listeners. Number two, I got to say, Brian and I had this very interesting conversation when we were trying to narrow in on the tracks. He was like, I want to focus on the things that really highlight the big band. And I was saying, I really want to focus on the things that highlight like this really great punchy mix. And I feel like when you get to the third album, it's just been getting progressively better and better and better. And like,
you are so right.
Man.
You are so right. It's so true. The sonic detail in the difference when you listen to the first versus the third is like, whoa, it really opens up. And that's all thanks to our engineer, mixing engineer, John Kilgore, who's a veteran, 2-time Grammy Award winning recording and mixing engineer. He's done every single 8-bit big band track. And when we first started doing it, we did it in his studio, which is a small studio, and we did it one section at a time because I wasn't sure if it was worth spending all this money on it. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I was spending a ton of money. I was trying to save money. So we did it like rhythm section, saxes, and then trumpets and bones. And it sounded great, but doesn't have like, it has a bit of a tight sound to it because it was recorded like that. It still sounds amazing. But then once you hear the third album, we started recording in like legendary full-size recording studio, the Power Station here in New York. We could have everybody in the same room and just great sounding room with excellent room miking and excellent horn miking. And just, it's sort of like just going in without even being mixed, his miking techniques are so good and the room sounds so good that it's just like, whoa, it just sounds so much more open. So thank you for noticing that.
Yeah, my regards to the chef.
Indeed.
I will say, great mix. And the tracks, like, I feel like by the time we get to the third album, it was really hard for us to even take any tracks out. We were like, how do we even narrow this down? But tell us about this track specifically.
So, Hydrocity Zone, and also I just want to thank you for saying Hydrocity Zone. I know the debate rages on whether it's Hydrocity or Hydrocity, which I get into a fight with the audience. Every single show I bring it up at the audience and get a mixtures of applause and boos. And I stand my ground. Carlos, Insane the Rain, thinks it's Hydrocity, and it's not. It's Hydrocity. And Brian, you'll agree with me because if you read the katakana, you'll know.
Yes, that's exactly what.
You'll know we're right. So,
always got to play the katakana card. That's exactly
right.
how it works. Yeah,
damn straight. So I'll take this to the grave, or I'll die on this hill. Is really what the metaphor when he's. Anyway, this there's so much great sonic music, and it's all so funky and so awesome, and this was no exception. And so immediately my first thought was like, what's the sort of horn band full, big band version of this? And it's like, well, it's Tower of Power. It has to be Tower of Power.
Oh my God, thank you.
It must be. So if you listen to Soul with a capital S by Tower of Power, you'll be like, you're a goddamn thief. But
great artists steal, yeah.
They really do. Yeah, and so the whole song throughout it has a number of Tower of Power quotes from different songs, like Soul with a capital S, What is Hip? I think there's something from Soul Vaccination as like the boop da da do da do da. Oh no, that's not Soul Vaccination. That's I just love Tower of Power so much. So there's lots of quotes from Tower of Power in there, and I wanted to feature Grace on something. She's such a bombastic sax player, and so yeah, this seemed like the right thing.
Nice. Have you ever seen Tower of Power live? Oh
yeah, I did. They're so awesome. That was back in. This is a long time ago now, but man, they kick ass.
Yeah, I think I saw them at Yoshi's a few times in Oakland.
Yeah,
because they're based in Oakland, right, Gene?
Yeah.
Yoshi's?
Yeah.
Well, there used to be one
no. Tower of Power.
Tower of Power.
I didn't know that actually. But I mean, there's the Oakland Yoshi's, so I've been up there
that's
a few times.
that's what I've seen.
That's where I saw the Rippingtons, one of my favorite concerts of all time.
Oh, I don't know them. That's cool.
We bring them up too often on the show. They're like they're the Weather Channel house band from the 90s.
Oh, sick.
For real.
I'm into that.
I bring them up. Yeah.
Wait, they actually are. You're not.
Yes,
that's not
no. Like you can buy albums like Weather Channel Volume 1 and 2.
Yo,
yeah.
I want to check
I'm
that
not
out.
joking.
I'm not either. That sounds awesome. That's killing. What are they called?
Russ Freeman and the Rippingtons. It's they've been playing for about 30 years now.
Okay, I'm gonna check that out because that Weather Channel stuff is super happening.
Oh, it's very happening. It's very happening.
Awesome.
Let's move on from this topic because we're gonna go down that road too long.
Oh God. Okay, so that was Hydrocity's in it. I'm just kidding. That was Hydrocity. We're going to jump into Dire Dire Docks, and this is featuring Charlie Rosen on guitar, jazz guitar.
On bass.
Oh, bass. Sorry.
That was Dire Dire Docks from Super Mario 64 off of the 8-Bit Big Band third album, Backwards Compatible. And I just want to note for the people that are paying attention, we have now spent about 15 minutes collectively in water levels. So suck it, water level haters. I know that's a debate that goes on in video games.
People don't like them for their mechanics, but they always have great music.
It's almost without a doubt.
I'll tell you what, the best thing about Dire Dire Docks in the game is that you're only in the water a little bit. So
yes,
it's a good balance.
You can be out of the water if you want to. And same with Jolly Roger Bay, I'll just say for reference. If you want to be outside the water, you can.
That's a good point. So, Dire Dire Docks, talk to us about your solo here. It's incredible. It just sounds so smooth and buttery. Really, really like this track. And this is what we had this trouble deciding whether we do Aquatic Ambiance or this, because they both just have this especially if you're in that kind of relaxing, kind of just like melt into your chair mood, they just touch every single note that you would want. So tell us about this track.
Yeah, and it's actually cool that you picked between those two, because sort of functionally in the big picture of the album arcs, they are serving the same purpose. What I said about Aquatic Ambiance, I can also kind of say about Dire Dire Docks. I wanted to take this contemporary big band, floaty, ethereal approach with it. I also have the soprano singer on it. It also has like some synths and some synth pads. It has some lush strings. It's sort of a similar take orchestrationally. The one big difference being that I wanted this to be a bass feature, and actually it came about because we were doing a live show in 2020. And my friend Adam Neely was going to be featured in the show. And I thought, wow, I got to arrange something for Adam. I mean, he's so great. And so I arranged two things for him. And one was Saria's song. And the other one was this. And I thought, I'm a bass player too. I'm a huge Jaco Pastorius fan. And Jaco Pastorius has a legendary sort of groundbreaking bass track called Portrait of Tracy. It's a bass solo where he uses almost entirely harmonics. And if anybody's a guitar bass player, they'll know what I mean. It's this extended technique on the bass where you lightly touch particular parts of the string and they ring out with these very high-pitched bell tones. So the entire intro of that track is a tribute to the Jaco Pastorius bass solo, Portrait of Tracy. But I wrote a new harmonics bass solo for Dire Dire Docks. And there's another Jaco Pastorius song called Continuum, which is very similar feel to this track, floaty and ethereal, and the melody is way high up on the bass. And so this whole arrangement is a huge tribute to Jaco Pastorius and his playing style and how he was a groundbreaking bass player. The reason I'm playing it on the album is because I was putting the album together. Adam had recorded both songs already, and I was looking at it and going and I called Adam and I said, Adam, bass is my main instrument, and it's the only time that I feel like I'm ever going to be able to play an instrument at a high enough level to compete with the other soloists that I hire in the band. to be featured on a track with my own band, I only feel comfortable doing it on the bass. And so would you mind if I took Dire Dire Docks and you can keep Saria's song on the album? And he was totally cool with it, of course. But it was okay, because this is really my only chance. I cannot play the other instruments well enough to compete with the other soloists. So it became mine. I recorded my version of it. And that's the origin behind that.
That's incredible. And Jaco Pastorius is a legend.
Oh, yeah. Legend. He made a brief appearance on our golf episode, Japan Pro Golf Tour. We played an excerpt from one of the composers. We found his music, and apparently he was also a huge fan of Jaco Pastorius.
Oh,
actually,
cool.
The song Liberty City, I had to look it up.
Oh, yeah, cool. I love that. That's awesome. I love that song.
Yeah.
So with the technique that you're talking about for the harmonics, is that something with like tapping, or is it something that you're actually doing it like fretless, or how does it actually work?
Yeah, you can do it on any string instrument because it's not tapping. You're not pressing hard on the string. What you're essentially doing is you're split. If the string vibrates in a big S shape in very, very fast motion, if you lightly touch exactly halfway on the string, but don't press because pressing will mute it, very lightly place your finger on it, it divides the big S into two smaller S's, and that makes the literal waveform of the string vibrate twice as fast, so it's an octave higher. There's also a point where you can very lightly touch the string and divide it into thirds, so it'll be 3 sine waves. That'll be an octave and a fifth higher. Then there's a point where you can do it and it'll divide it into fourths. That's 2 octaves higher, and then there's a sixth and all the way up. and it's called the harmonic series. And you can get the harmonic series on a string instrument by lightly touching very specific spots. It's kind of like a tightrope walk, and it's tough. It's tough to get them to ring out, and it's really specific. And so him doing that on the bass and doing a whole solo using that technique was very innovative for the time.
I've seen I don't know if it was him, but I've seen there's a few other bassists I watch, and I'll see them doing like harmonics, but at the same time doing finger tapping too, which is like, to me, it's just like my brain just explodes. Like I can't handle that level of complexity. It's
yeah, that's
so
like
much.
two insanely difficult things put together at once. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Gene, you ready to move on?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
All right. So this next track is a special track. We'll listen to it first, and then we'll talk more about it. This is Meta Knight's Revenge, featuring Button Masher from Kirby Superstar. All right, that was Meta Knight's Revenge featuring Button Masher from Kirby Superstar.
Gotta say, Button Masher's been making a bit of a name for himself as kind of like a chip jazz improviser. If you haven't seen his sets, I mean, everybody that you've had featured has been really great, but he kind of caught me off guard when he first kind of hit the scene, and I feel like this is a great track to feature him on.
Yeah. Yeah, what he does, it's so awesome to work with him because he sort of is like the inverse of the 8-bit big band, where we're taking all these chiptunes and turning them into acoustic orchestra. He's taking the chiptune element of it and like his jazz education going the other way and doing these incredible contemporary jazz reharm things in the chiptune vernacular. You know, we pair together really well. It's been really cool.
Yeah.
And this was an arrangement of his that he did on his MIDI organ with the sound fonts from Kirby Superstar, and I heard it and went, "Holy let's expand this. Let's do this." And so I took it and orchestrated it for the full band, and I added an intro and an outro and some stuff in the middle. And yeah, I mean, his source material and his chords and his lines that he wrote are just so awesomely dense. Like I could have never thought of them myself. They're so advanced.
Well, I'm going to say something that's a little too late for our listeners, but listen to this show on the highest Fi system you've got, because there's so much detail in all of these tracks that it really comes out. I'm listening to it on my, headphones while we're recording, and it sounds so great, but there's something very special we want to say about this track, isn't there? And I'll let Charlie say it, because I don't want to ruin it.
Well, it's very exciting because for the third time ever, a piece of video game music has been acknowledged by the Recording Academy. And so we were nominated for a Grammy for this song, which is incredible.
Bravo.
Which is very cool. I mean, it's so exciting. It's such a huge deal for video game music at large that this niche thing would even be recognized. And so it's a huge thrill and honor. I mean, it was so unexpected. It still kind of is like, I can't believe it happened, to be honest.
That's pretty incredible. That's pretty awesome.
That's an amazing honor.
You just said niche, but Gene and I talk about this all the time. Like we still think of it as niche, like our generation, right? But like if you look over the last 15 years, like it's actually becoming pretty mainstream now, right?
Oh,
and so it's not like, I wouldn't say it's even a stretch that this has been nominated. I mean, it's excellent music, and who cares what it's from at that point, right?
I agree. Video game music is just great music. It stands alone as its own genre and canon and field. And honestly, if the Grammys was forward thinking, they would make a separate category for, best video game soundtrack, because the one video game music soundtrack that was nominated, which is amazing, is Austin Wintory's soundtrack for Journey, but it was up against all these these heavy film scoring cats, and that's like apples and oranges, like it should be its own field, its own category.
And we actually had a chat with Austin about this very thing.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
We had a chat with him about this actually in DC.
At the Library of Congress.
A few years ago, and it was strange because they're clumping a game soundtrack in with film scores, but they're two very separate forms of media.
Totally.
When one is meant to be an interactive kind of experience, the other one is a very static experience.
Right.
Well, there's nothing wrong with either one. They're just very different.
They're totally different skill sets. They really are.
Exactly. So
totally different skills.
Yeah, something that might sound more simplistic or something on the game side of it maybe is deliberately arranged that way for the play mechanics or the experience that you're going to have. So
it's not competing with the game. Yeah.
Right. And what I think is really cool about this nomination, is it's the first time out of the 3 times that video game music has been recognized by the Grammys that it's not compounded with the release of the game that it's with. Journey soundtrack, Baba Yato was from Civ. This is a reimagining of an already existing piece of material, which is a first and is really cool to be recognized for that, because it adds legitimacy to the idea that video game music is a canon of music that is a well for other musicians to reinterpret and transform and reimagine as its own body of work.
I read this as a sign of things to come, not necessarily like, why aren't we further along? I know we all wish it was, but the fact that it's happening, as you just said, I mean, Kirby Superstar is 20-something years old now.
95, 96.
Yeah, so it's not like we're talking about something that just came out that, the recency bias that's getting...
Right.
So whoever listened to this was so blown away by the arrangement that they're like, we have to nominate this.
Right. Yeah. And I can only imagine, I don't want to assume anything, but I can't imagine that the large number of voters of in the arrangement field are gamers that played Kirby Superstar. So,
Probably not.
Probably
no.
not.
You know what? Actually, I got a question. How many people do you bring into the studio to record that it's like, oh my God, I love this game? Or like, I mean, were there a lot of like gamers in your big band?
Yeah, I think by the fact that I am the age that I am, and so are many of my friends, generally it's about 50-50. Some people are like, I love playing this stuff and they're great tunes, but I've never heard of these games, but it's really fun. And I'd say the other half are like, oh, Song of Storms, hell yeah, I love I love Zelda. Or like really remote ones are like Zach Zinger is a game music composer himself, so he knows all of them. Or another good example is like on the third album, we featured Leo P on a track from Too Many Zoos and other things. He's an incredible sax player. And he specifically was like, I really have always wanted to do the underground theme from Super Mario Land for the Game Boy. I'm like,
it was a tough call. We took that one out.
We took that one out. It's a good one.
But
that was such a good one.
Folks, please listen to that track. It's got, like the Middle Eastern jazz tradition in full force. It's not. It's becoming more popular these days, but I'm so glad to hear that you really went there with it.
Oh man, there was another little homage in that track.
There's so many homages in that one.
And
that one is like,
what did I say last night, Gene? There was one
you
that
said
really
it was Led Zeppelin, right?
Oh, there was a Zeppelin part in there. Yeah.
So there's some Led Zeppelin Kashmir in there. There's some like Kulthum Arabic classical music in there. Stuff that I'm inspired by. And then there's a big Camille Saint-Saëns quote from the ballet, the Bacchanal from the ballet Samson and Delilah. That's like there's a big quote in there from that.
Wow.
Yeah,
a lot of really good music.
I steal so much.
That's what good artists do. Yeah. So there's so much more music to really explore and listen to. You have 3 full albums, and then you have some smaller albums. We wanted to play something from the KK album that you have, which is a bunch of KK Slider music from like Animal Crossing, stuff like that. And but just most of your tracks were good, like 4 to 5 minutes. So we really were like, oh man, we got only limited time to put this stuff in here. So we had to take that stuff out, but we will be pushing everybody to take a listen because there's some really, really fun stuff in there. It's great music to just throw on during the day and just have in the background, just make your day that much better. Yeah.
I love that little EP. I actually listen to it all the time. I feel like, it's all those tracks are just so fun to listen to, and it's sort of we released it in 2020 during quarantine, and it sort of reminds me weirdly nostalgic for that period of early quarantine when we were all like, what's gonna happen? And now it's like, oh, the world's trash,
That's so funny. We were just talking about the tracks that we were gonna play from there. If you're gonna pick one without us tainting this, which track would you say is your favorite on there?
Maybe a controversial choice because a lot of people love Bubblegum KK, and I think the first one I did was KK Disco, which is like I think the best KK song in my opinion. But my favorite from that album is KK Moody. Actually, is the last one. It's like this ballad, and I just think the band sounds so incredible, and Patrick Bartley's clarinet solo is so just tasteful and lovely, and it just makes me emotional to listen to it. So I'm gonna pick KK Moody.
Awesome. Yeah, we had KK Bossa, Bubblegum KK, and KK Moody as our like tops for that. I mean, there's only like 6 tracks on the album.
So, exactly.
So
people are this far into the show. What do you say we throw it in, Brian?
Let's just do it. Or we're gonna play. Let's play KK Moody.
Yeah.
All right.
So that was KK Moody from our EP that we released in 2020, the KK Sessions, which everybody in March and April of 2020 was playing Animal Crossing. And so it felt like a good time to remotely record an Animal Crossing EP.
Very good point. I was in that category as well. It's just, like, it was the best thing to do during.
They could not have picked a better time to release that game. Wow.
Secretly, we all know Nintendo is behind the
exactly.
That's not really the way to go about it. But if there's one thing that I want to impress on the listeners is just the variety in arrangements and styles and genres on display across all of the 8-Bit Big Band albums. I mean, I think that's one of the things that really we were so excited about with this show is, you know, we do have some listeners that are a little bit more on the, you know, listen to the original chip. I love more of, you know, how it sounds. But I've also just been so impressed and inspired by just how much the world of reimagining and reinterpreting all these classic songs. And I think you guys are pretty damn close to the top.
Thanks. And yeah, and what I appreciate about that is, like, I think a good sort of mission statement for this band is there are nowadays, and it's amazing, tons of orchestras that are playing video game music, and it's so cool. And they're these large ensembles, and quite often they're either doing sort of like one-to-one representations, you know, where they are, as orchestras, trying to be as completely faithful to the timing and the representation of how they sound in the game, but just with real instruments, you know, and that's awesome. Like, I saw the Final Fantasy VII Remake concert tour in London, and it was awesome. It sounded unbelievable. It was a very, very faithful one-to-one remake of what those orchestrations should sound like, you know, and that is great. I love it. But the 8-Bit Big Band's goal was to be like, okay, great, but, you know, what about all of the sort of studio orchestras and jazz bands of the mid-century that were playing with this stuff and reinterpreting it and truly making it into its own experience, standing alone outside of the context and the function of the originals, as opposed to being a completely faithful representation, is to really take this stuff and run with it and see how far we can, you know, push these themes and melodies into their own world as concert music, you know?
Yeah, no, it's a really good time right now for arrangements and stuff to become more, especially with, you know, the younger generations. When I say younger, I mean our generations. I'm still considering myself kind of young.
Us and below.
And below. Because a lot of stuff of what we grew up with, and so being able to hear it in a different context, or what kind of we imagined it being in, is also a very special thing. And again, going back to the Final Fantasy VII Remake concert that you were at, I was at a Symphony of the Goddess, the Zelda one.
Yeah.
And it was very much like a kind of a one-to-one, but at the same time, being able to hear this kind of orchestrated version was really, really special.
So cool. I saw that concert as well. It sounded unbelievable. It was awesome.
Yeah. Super fun. And especially hearing stuff like, you know, from like the Game Boy version of, you know, Zelda Link's Awakening, and hearing that like as a, you know, a full orchestra was incredible.
Yeah. And I think both of them are important. I think they both can coexist really well. You know, we should be honoring these one-to-one arrangements and orchestrations. And these are being put on, you know, in collaborations with the video game companies who made these games. And so they have a mission to uphold what these sound like, you know, and that makes perfect sense. They're like, let's do it. This is the songs. Make the songs orchestral.
It wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense for, like, you know, Square Enix to say like, hey, let's just do a big band.
Do whatever
like
you want.
Yeah,
go off. Whatever. You know, like that's not the point of those concerts, and they are amazing and awesome, and they should exist, and I'm glad they exist. It's good for everybody. Similarly, we should do the function of expanding it and going and doing our own thing with it as well. They have to both exist. I don't think, because one can't exist without the other. Somebody has to tell you how it is before you can expand on it, you know?
But just to kind of add on to that a little bit, you know, one thing I did hear sort of, you know, through the ether is a lot of those concerts that are one-to-one just aren't as interesting to play for the orchestra members. So what you're doing is bringing back that love of, you know, like the musicianship in reinterpreting these classics. So what you're doing is extremely valuable, and it's that much more fun to play music that you actually enjoy playing. You know, like we've heard the Palkable canon rant of like playing the same 4 notes over and over again. You know, it could be great music, but if you can do things to make the musicians more engaged, that's amazing too.
Right. And because we're not operating for any one particular objective to like further up any one particular product or game, I'm not really under the thumb of anybody, so I can do whatever.
Exactly.
That's the best. Cool. So to wrap up here, we have one last track that we're going to end the show with. we'll talk a little bit about it, but Charlie, thank you so much for joining us to talk about your arrangements, 8-bit big bands, and your career and your history in not only game audio, but just arranging and bands and music in general. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me. It's been really fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you've got a few plugs you wanted to say. I think the show coming up on the 20th is probably going to have already passed by the time this comes out.
Yes.
But, yeah.
But if this comes out in time, we have a show at the Howard Theater on March 25th in Washington, D.C., and surely we'll be out for this next one. We have a show on April 9th in Boston at the Berkeley Performance Center, and everybody should come. Tell your friends. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're also currently working on album 4. April 3rd is the Grammy Awards, and so maybe by the time you're listening to this, we may or may not have won a Grammy. We shall see.
We'll take a little credit for that, Grant. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, I don't think so. But anyway, so the track that we're going to be playing to end the show is the Super Mario World end theme, and appropriately, the end of the 3rd album. So, Charlie, tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Well, this one's great, and I really wanted to end the 3rd album on sort of like a good old big band swing note. We do a lot of not swing, but at the end of the day, we are a big band, and we should swing it out. So this is a sort of like tribute to Count Basie, Neil Hefti, like just good old-fashioned swing mid-century big band tribute to this piece, which the writing was already there in the original. Sort of, I could tell that Koji Kondo was kind of going for this thing, and then also good crossover for me is in the middle of the original. Koji made a move where it sort of goes into double time, becomes this kind of like old school Broadway show tune thing. So I went, oh, you picked the right guy for that. I certainly know how to do that. And so it breaks into this good old Broadway up-tempo 2-feel in the middle before bringing it home with like just some big band horns and swing, and it's just a good send-off for a big band, I would say.
Awesome. Love it. We absolutely love the track. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Super fun.
And thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you back in a few weeks for the next episode.